In a time where many say they follow the way of the Salaf, how do we distinguish between whom we should take knowledge from and whom we should avoid? Your scholars and their students, they guide you in this regard. So we know the great scholars of the current day scholars, the likes of Shaykh Salih Fawzan, Hafizahullah Ta'ala, likes of Shaykh Abdul Muhsin al-Abbad, Shaykh Rabi' bin Hadi, and others. They inform us. They inform us of the scholars to take from, the scholars on the correct path, and the students. Likewise, the students that benefited greatly from those individuals. Because in all actuality, there's several things you can look at. One of the things we will mention is we don't just take knowledge from anyone. We don't just take knowledge from anyone. There was an actual wonderful statement by Imam Ash-Shatibi, rahimahullah ta'ala, and it was in the lecture, but we didn't get to it. And that was when he was speaking about the characteristics of an individual you take knowledge from. When he was speaking about the characteristics of an individual who you take knowledge from. And I'm paraphrasing it. I actually have it, but because we're not looking at it. He was speaking about the characteristics of an individual who you take knowledge from. And he said, you take knowledge from an individual who was taught by the scholars of Islam. He said, you take knowledge from the individual who was taught by the scholars of Islam. They taught him the knowledge, and they also taught him the mannerism of giving knowledge. Right? Then he said, and once again I'm paraphrasing it, it's not verbatim. He said that this is the manner of taking knowledge, because the Sahaba took knowledge from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum did not just go to their homes and become knowledgeable. They learned from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We gave the example earlier how Umar ibn Khattab, who had a family, but he used to take turns with his neighbor from the Ansar. He used to take turns. One day he works, and the neighbor sits with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The next day, they take turns. Why? Because this is how you get knowledge. Sit with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Imam Shatibi said, so the Sahaba learned from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Tabi'un learned from the Sahaba. So the way the Tabi'un, and the Tabi'un are the generation after the Sahaba, the way they learned is from the Sahaba. The Tabi'un didn't just say, I'm just going to sit home, right? And just knowledge will come to me. No, they learned from the Sahaba. That's why the individuals who became from the most knowledgeable from amongst the Tabi'un, they were the ones that sat with the Sahaba. They were the ones that sat with the Sahaba. Imam Shatibi says, and this is the way knowledge will continue. The Prophet ﷺ taught the Sahaba. The Sahaba taught the Tabi'un. The Tabi'un taught the Atba' Tabi'in, and it has to continue like that. Even if you want to take it a step further, did the Prophet ﷺ just sit there and become knowledgeable? No. He learned from Jibreel. He learned from Jibreel. At times, our beloved Messenger Muhammad ﷺ, people would ask him questions. At times, people would approach the Messenger ﷺ and ask him questions, and he would be silent. The Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum said, when we saw him being silent and lowering his head, we knew that he was waiting for Jibreel to come. We knew that he was waiting for Jibreel to come. That means the Prophet ﷺ was taught by Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam, and Jibreel received the knowledge from Allah Azza wa Jal. And so there's a chain. There's a chain. Likewise, and this is definitely in response to what you see today, where you have these influencers, social media influencers on TikTok, on YouTube, on Instagram, right? These individuals just pop up out of the blue and start posting videos. Where did you study? Who are your teachers? Where did you learn? Who has verified your knowledge? No one knows. But people today, because they lack knowledge, but some people want guidance, so they just go on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram and they just look for a video. So you look for a video and that video guides you to certain individuals. But who said those individuals are to be taken from? Who said those individuals are to be taken from? Where did he study? Who confirmed his knowledge? Has he traveled for knowledge? Has he sat with the scholars? Do the scholars recommend him? There's a problem. We don't just take knowledge from anybody. We don't just take knowledge from anyone. So this is very important. Another thing is that same trend that we mentioned, that the Prophet ﷺ learned from Jibreel, the Sahaba learned from the Prophet, the Tabi'un learned from the Sahaba, the Atba'a Tabi'in learned from them, right? Continue. And because of that, if you look at the books of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, one of the greatest scholars of Islam, who died 728, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, look at his books. Open up his books. Whenever, open any book of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, you find that when he mentions the issues about fiqh, when he mentions the issues about salat, when he mentions the issue about hajj, zakat, umrah, he mentions Imam Malik says this, Imam Shafi'i says this, Imam Ahmad says this, the Zahiriyya says this. He mentions the scholars that came before him. Yeah, understand, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala is one of the greatest scholars in Islam. One of the greatest scholars in Islam, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. But he's not bringing it from himself. He's informing you where he got it from. The Hanafiya says this, the Shafi'i says this, the Malikiyya says this, Imam Ahmad says this person says this, Imam Thawri, Sufyan al-Thawri says this, Imam Layth bin Sa'ad says this, Abdullah bin Mubarak. He's letting you know that he's taking from the scholars before him. He's letting you know that he's taken from the scholars before him. Tayyib. If we come now to 1446 or 2024, and you open up the books of the great scholars of our time, the books of Shaykh Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, the books of Shaykh Salih Fawzan, hafizahullah ta'ala, open up their books in fiqh, open up their books in aqidah. They are mentioning Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah says this, Imam Ahmad says this, Ibn Qayyim says this. So they're letting you know where they're taking their knowledge from. Who were their teachers? Where did they benefit from? Now compare them to the individuals that you see on social media. They don't mention anybody from the Salaf. They don't mention anybody from the Salaf. Why? From the greatest scholars of Islam, they mentioned the scholars from the Salaf. They said, no, but we don't want to divide the people. So you're looking at the numbers, you're not looking at the quality. You're looking at numbers. They feel, no, if I start to mention Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, if I mention Ibn Qayyim, if I mention Shaykh Fawzan, current day scholars, Shaykh Uthaym, people say, oh, so I don't want to divide the people. So you're looking at quantity, you're not looking at quality. You're looking at quantity, you're not looking at quality. That is something you find in all of those influencers. All of those influencers. They don't mention Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah says this, Imam Ahmad. They don't mention them. They want to cut us off from the Salaf. Want to cut us off. So this is a major problem. This is a major problem. We want to know who we take our knowledge from. Imam Muhammad ibn Sirin, as you find from the Tabi'een, Imam Muhammad ibn Sirin, in the introduction to Sahih Muslim, he said, "Inna hadha ilmu din, fanzuru amman takhudhu dinakum." Your knowledge is religion. So look at who you take your knowledge from. Look at who you take your knowledge from. And you can find it in the introduction to Sahih Muslim. He also mentions in the introduction to Sahih Muslim, he said, we didn't ask the chain of narration before. Everyone was trustworthy. The Sahaba were trustworthy. He said, we didn't ask until fitna took place. You understand? Umar ibn Khattab was what? Assassinated. Umar radiallahu ta'ala was assassinated. Uthman was what? Assassinated. Ali was what? Assassinated. Hassan and Hussein was what? Look at how many Sahaba are being assassinated. So Muhammad ibn Sirin said, we used to trust each other. until fitna took place. Here's Sahaba being killed. Umar killed. Yani Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu died, natural causes. But Umar was killed. Uthman was killed. Ali, yani the three caliphs after Abu Bakr, all three of them were assassinated, killed. Umar was killed in the masjid. Umar was killed in the masjid after Salat al-Fajr. Or there was an attempt, but he died from the wounds. Right? He died from the wounds. Uthman was killed in his house while he was reading the Quran. In his 90s. In his 90s. This is not a man that's a threat. He's in his 90s. Killed. The point is, Muhammad ibn Sirin from the Tabi'in, he said, we did not ask about the chain of narration until the fitna took place. Till the fitna took place. People started getting killed, assassin, making up lies, fabrication. After that, we stopped. When anyone informed us, we would say, where did you hear it from? Yarhamakallah. Where did you hear it from? Then he said, we would look at the people of the Sunnah and we would take knowledge. We would look at the people of innovation and we would not take knowledge from them. So that was, and Imam Muhammad ibn Sirin died 100 and something, yani 1,300 years ago. So what is the case now? We have to be careful. We have to filter. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّهُ مَنْ يَعِشْ مِنْكُمْ فَسَيَرَى اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. In the hadith of Irbad bin Sari, whoever lives, you're going to see many differences. Take from this, take from this, take from this. You see many differences. فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِالسُنَّةِ وَسُنَّةِ الْخُلَفَاءِ الرَّاشِدِينَ. It's upon you to follow my sunnah and find the sunnah of my rightly guided caliphs. Hold on to it with your molar teeth. Be aware of the newly invented affairs. Be aware of the newly invented affairs. So this is very important. Who we take knowledge from. Seek advice from the imam of your community, from the students of knowledge that are trustworthy, that studied with the scholars, benefited from. Seek advice from them. Who should I take knowledge from? Because indeed we are living in very, very difficult times.